No one plans to grow up and be a pregnancy loss coach. Yet here I am, and I thought to share the really wiggly career path that I have taken to get where I am now. My name is Bianca Johnson. I'm an empowerment coach based out of the South African KZN Midlands, and I bring a lifetime of experience, not only through the 8 pregnancies and 6 losses that I've experienced, but also worldwide life experience. My word for the year in 2026 is me, and I'm filtering all of my decisions for the business this year through the lens of the trinity of me: 8-year-old me, 48-year-old me, and 80-year-old me. 8-year-old me loved to roller skate. She loved to be center stage. She believed in magic, and she wanted to grow up and be either a guide at Disneyland or a star on the West End in Starlight Express. Those were the 2 jobs that she knew of that she could do on roller skates that weren't being a waitress, because that was the one thing she knew she didn't want to be. The other thing I knew I wanted to be when I grew up was a mom. And although the roller skating fell by the wayside and the mom took a lot longer to get there, I have done all sorts of things, and it has made me who I am today. In high school, I used to dress up as a clown and paint faces for birthday parties, as well as doing babysitting jobs like a lot of women I know. I then moved to university, and while I was there, I got a job as Chica the Clown at our Spur in South Africa. That's a steakhouse. Their children's character is called Chica the Clown and paints faces for kids. It's rather amusing because I kept that hidden from my friends. No one knew that I was Chica the Clown until one day a group of my friends were there and they looked down and they recognized my rainbow shoelaces. Suddenly realized that I was Chica the Clown and had been dressing up for months at that point, most Friday nights, to paint kids' faces. Following in my passion for drama and having gone to the National School of the Arts, I started working at the Hexagon Theatre, which was the on-campus theatre for my university. I worked front of house and I worked in stage management at the Hex. I really enjoy being around creatives. So that was a fun career, lots of washing dishes, mostly wine glasses in the theatre, but it was something I really enjoyed. And I continued to do some babysitting. University was the first time that I realized I had a brain for tech. The internet, as some of you may know, was brand new, and so I did end user computing as a course, and I still laugh that a friend of mine in our final exam had to ask me where to turn the computers on, and I was like, that's when I knew that tech was not her forte, but I really enjoyed it. I started tutoring my lecturers in how to use computers and Excel, and that is utterly hysterical. If you know me now, I hired someone to come in and assist me with my finances because I am so anti spreadsheets. It's rather amusing to remember that my very first tech job was teaching my lecturer how to use Excel. I then went overseas and au paired for a year. I had 2 families that I worked for in America. I was for 3 months with a family in Minnesota, and so I was very affected by everything that's been happening in the US, particularly with the incidences in Minnesota with ice and those sorts of things. That was a city that I had lived in for 3 months. I then rematched and moved to the US East Coast. I was just outside of Washington, D.C., and that is definitely my favorite part of the United States. I absolutely loved it there. Working as an au pair was great fun for me. I remember the mum saying to me that she believes every working mum needs a wife, and that as an au pair, that was my role to support her in her parenting. And I so believe in that now as well. It was a highlight of my stay, was staying with that family and experiencing everything that the mid-East Coast has to offer: 4 seasons, seeing the cherry blossoms in Washington, D.C., getting to experience all of the museums. It really was an exciting time. From the US, it was free for me to fly to London, or I had to pay $800 to come home. And I was like, well, I'll just go to London. Most South Africans have it in their heads that they will go to the UK, and it was the time of still being able to get working holiday visas. So off I went to London. My first job in London it was 1999. And so I got a job working in a pub so that I would work the Millennium. I was live for that, everyone. There's probably some of you that weren't. I worked the Millennium in a pub and was in London for the year 2000, which was pretty exciting. Lots of things going on. I worked in the pub, and to supplement that income during the day, I handed out leaflets for an antique company in the fancy parts of London. Not my favorite job ever, I will admit. I was very keen to get something that would pay me a little bit more and would be a bit more stable. I found a temporary job where I worked as a secretary in a psychiatric day facility, which was quite interesting. I was locked into the building. The work was boring. It was a job, but it was only a temporary fill in for someone who was away. So the job ended after a few weeks. I then found a job selling gas and electricity door to door, which for people in countries where that isn't an option sounds entirely bizarre, but it was an option in the UK. And so I went door to door for the best part of about 6 months, convincing people to switch their gas and electricity providers. And it was eye-opening. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about sales. I learned that I'm not very good at sales. I learned about teamwork. I learned how to deal with different people. And actually, I have some wonderful memories of that time. I then came home for a holiday, and when I went back to London, I decided I definitely was not going back to selling gas and electricity door to door. So I looked in the newspaper to see what jobs were available, and happened to catch something that said they were hiring a hotel staff in the Scottish Highlands. I phoned them from the tube, and they accepted me the moment I phoned. It was one of those really bizarre conversations where I was hired before they even knew what my name was. And turns out that the guys that worked at the hotel had said if a woman phones and asks to apply, then they need to hire her on the spot, and that they didn't want any more men because they were tired of everyone at the hotel being male. So off I went to the Scottish Highlands. I worked in a tiny boutique hotel halfway along the longest dead-end road in Europe. I learned a lot about different cultures, different people, managing a hotel, peeling potatoes, the works. Some of my favorite recipes have come from there as well. From the Scottish Highlands, we only worked until September because then it gets too cold and miserable. And so came back to London, and I made the decision that I was going home. I couldn't stomach doing another winter in London. I came home, and this is probably one of my favorite stories about me manifesting a job. I had, after the experience in Scotland, decided that I was going to eventually open a hotel for families with special needs children, and that I needed to get more hotel experience. So I decided that I was going to get a job at a hotel. I printed about 20 copies of my CV, and I literally had my dad drop me on the Durban beachfront, and I walked door to door to every hotel along the beachfront, went in, asked, "Are you hiring anyone? I would like to work for you." And eventually, after about 15 hotels, they were looking for staff, and I got a position. So I worked in a hotel, started off at front of house, and after front of house, I moved to a position in conferencing and supporting the general manager. It was, again, a huge learning experience. I learned a lot about commercial hotel work. I learned a lot about conferencing, debt collection, and organizing conferences, and working out SOPs, essentially standard operating procedures of how conferences run, what paperwork's needed, all of that sort of stuff. I was there for about 6 months, and then I had itchy feet again and saw an advert in the newspaper to teach English in Taiwan. And I thought, well, okay, that sounds like a whole lot of fun. The requirement was a degree from an English-speaking country, so I ticked that box. When they interviewed me, they were so excited that I'd lived in America and I could put on an American accent, because American teachers are more highly prized than South Africans in Taiwan, apparently. So off I went to teach English in Taiwan. That was not the most fun. I loved working with the children, absolutely loved that. I used to joke that it was teaching by numbers, and you literally got a teacher's plan and the kids' books, and on this day you do section A, questions 3 through 9 kind of thing, which was not as much fun as I hoped it would be, but I absolutely loved the culture, exploring new foods, finding out new things. From a teaching and a work perspective, I got to deal with people with different accents. I got to understand different cultures in a very new and interesting way. I left that job after 6 months as well. I had traveled to Australia, where I wasn't really working, but I lived there for 4 months in Sydney, and then we came back to South Africa. When I returned to South Africa after Australia, I found a position as a temp for a insurance firm, and I got to do quite a lot of paperwork and get to know a very large working team. I was part of a team of about 12 who were in the office, and we supported over 100 insurance brokers. They used some of my experience from the conferencing to assist with the setting up workshops and training with the insurance brokers. But the main part of my task was capturing paper forms onto their computer system, because it was 2002 and people were not using online forms yet. And so we were needing to move from one system to the other. From there, I saw an advert for a travel agent job working for Flight Centre. I applied for that, went through that interview process, made it through, went to Johannesburg for training, which was really exciting. I hadn't been back in Joburg since I was in matric. Discovered something that I really enjoyed, the work at Flight Centre. Although the vast majority of what you do is pretty boring and very much the same, there are some wonderful highlights on a regular basis that wander in through the door, and I really, really enjoyed travel. I enjoyed building relationships with the reps and with product managers. It was an opportunity for me to learn a whole lot of information. It was an opportunity to use a lot of the information I already had to share with others, and Flight Centre was a real highlight in my career. Thing I've realised looking back, I thought I was just restless. I thought I just had itchy feet and couldn't stick at anything. But every single job taught me something I genuinely use now. The stage work gave me presence. The au pairing gave me an understanding of what it means to hold space for someone else's family. The sales job taught me how I don't want to sell, which has probably shaped my entire approach to coaching. The hotel work taught me how systems and people interact. The travel industry taught me how to hold a ridiculous amount of information in my head and make it useful to someone else. I wasn't building a CV. I was building a toolkit. I just didn't know what I was going to need it for yet. I worked there for 3 years, and then the family that I'd au paired for in Maryland had asked me if I wanted to come back out to the US. So I said, sure, I would love that. In my time in America, the kids were in school, and so I supplemented my income a little bit. I spent some time working in a pet store where I sold some of the most expensive puppies and puppy equipment that was available. They were very adamant that all of their puppies were not from puppy mills. They were from registered breeders. Usually what happened is the puppies were not AKC quality for whatever reason. And so we would get purebred puppies who didn't meet the requirements to be full show dogs for whatever reason. It was a really fun job. I also spent a few months helping to wash luxury yachts. I'm not quite sure what that taught me, except that when you're really cold, keeping moving is the only way to not go completely stiff. But I did get to see some really fancy boats and learn a little bit about boats. I then came back to South Africa because my sister was getting married and applied back to Flight Centre and got in there. And I worked there until I married my husband. One of my favorite things at Flight Centre, particularly later on, was doing round the world trips. I loved the figuring out which airline alliance to use and what would be the best way to fly someone around the world and those sorts of things. The other thing I did quite a lot of when I came back to Flight Centre was move around. I became team lead who moved to stores that were needing more support. I would move to stores where they maybe only had very new staff, and I would help train the staff up to run the office. I had the opportunity to see a lot of South Africa. I have travelled extensively with Flight Centre all over the world, which has been really exciting, and to get to see a lot of places around the world and experience a wide variety of cultures. After Flight Centre, I took a break for a little while. After my losses, needed the 6 months to just recover. A few weeks before I found out that I was pregnant with my son, I decided that I wanted to go back to work. And I applied to a job as a professional concierge, which was a lot of fun, very interesting. Again, lots of different people, lots of cultures, lots of different things. Very busy job. I loved it. Then I found out I was pregnant, but I carried on working for them. I left the concierge business after a few years and was focusing on parenting and being a stay-at-home mom for my son. It was quite an exciting time. I was very involved in cloth nappies and absolutely loved collecting them. But also it was an opportunity for me to get involved in an organization. I helped with the Great Cloth Diaper Change 2 years in a row. We ran the KZN event, a friend and I developed a passion for supporting work-at-home moms. We used to call them WAHM nappies, and they were the nappies that were created by parents who also had kids in nappies, and it was an opportunity for them to make a bit of money and do something that they were passionate about. And I then decided that I was going to start a business that was a combination of co-working and retail space for work-at-home moms. I founded the name WAHM Workspace. I started the business when my daughter was 3 months old. Not my brightest moment, and spent the first 3 months figuring out the co-working idea and looking for venues and looking at other co-working spaces in the area and just seeing what the options were. I ran a few lunch and learn events and started to kind of figure out how I was going to make this business work. Also realizing that it was going to take quite a lot more than I was able to give, particularly financially. I started to think about ways that I could pivot my business. 2017 was my year of try everything, and someone suggested that I look into money coaching. I started working with a money coach, and she then suggested that I maybe look at starting a virtual assistance business. And at that point, I had no idea what a VA was, how they worked, what they did. None of that. Had looked into it. And so that was how WAHM Workspace became a virtual assistant business. I started with myself. I was mainly offering services to the money coach. I then added some more VAs to the team, including my later business partner, who was a finance whiz. And we still joke to this day that my very first job in tech was in Excel, and I hired her specifically so that I didn't have to deal with Excel. From there, we grew the business. We were perfectly positioned to explode in 2020. We were already very familiar with tech. We were working with clients all over the world. We had transitioned into mainly supporting clients who were creating online coaching platforms. And so in 2020, where the whole world had to switch to online very quickly, we were perfectly aligned and experienced to take on a lot of that work. And my business quadrupled in 2020 and continued to grow in 2021. In 2023, my husband and I moved out to the Midlands, and at the beginning of 2024, I closed WAHM Workspace. we made the decision that it was just taking a little bit too much energy from us, from me in particular, and it was no longer aligned with what I wanted with my life. 2024 and 2025 were years of change, lots of testing, trying. I ran workshops, I built websites, I helped businesses get online. I have done all sorts of online tech-related things. And 2025 was my year of publishing my book. And so that's what I did. A lot of my focus went to that. 2026 is me launching my pregnancy loss coaching year. It's taken a lot. I apologize for all the noises in the background because now my dogs have decided to start yelling at everyone. 2026 is my year of taking the support that I had built during my pregnancy losses and monetizing that, turning it into something of real value to the world. So much of what I have done throughout my Wiggly career path has fed into what I am doing here. None of it was wasted. The clown makeup, the Scottish potatoes, the gas bills, the round-the-world itineraries, the late nights keeping a tech business alive through a global pandemic. All of it is in the room with me every time I sit with someone who's navigating something enormous. I'm not just a pregnancy loss coach who reads books about grief. I'm someone who has lived in 5 countries, worked in about 15 industries, raised 2 kids after 6 losses, and somewhere in the middle of all of that, figured out how to hold people through the hardest moments of their lives. That's what a Wiggly career path actually looks like when you finally find the work you were always meant to do.